It's the 10th of September and things are hotting up. We're getting into by-election season. That's going to happen in about a month or so, a little bit over a month, where those by-elections will happen. And the by-elections are being called a litmus test for how parties and how political formations then will perform in the general election 2027. And political factions coming together and different realignments already happening. But it seems like one of the oldest parties in Kenya is still making waves and making moves. We'll get into those conversations. But joining us in the studio this morning is a Nairobi gubernatorial aspirant, Tony Gachoka, and he's here today. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Nairobi.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, actually. I woke up on the right side of the bed.
Okay, this is always a good thing.
And the sun was where I saw it last week. So that must mean that this week is one that is going to be gracious. And from my point of view, when you wake up on a bright sunny day, early in the week, things are going well.
This is good. So the sun is shining, the birds are chirping, Tony is awake. This is great. All right. We're getting into things this morning. And even as we do, we'll start off with Proverb. Dennis will tell you where it is. And it's also folks who are maybe in a little bit of a damn tiff. And a damn in this case is not an adjective.
And next time I come, I'll give him a proverb myself.
No worries at all. So we are facing north this week. And we're in a country which, at the moment, could have issues with Kenya. Together with another country, and this is because of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that was launched yesterday, and our president was in Ethiopia, and two countries are already having conversations that, look, this is wrong, and they will try to make some moves and have some conversations, and I'm talking about Sudan and Egypt, but our focus is Egypt, one of the oldest civilizations. The Nile, which is at the center of this conversation, is a 6,650 kilometer longest river in the world and Egypt's lifeline. 90% Egyptians say this is what we depend on, and so it's an issue. Still, at the same time, 90% of Egypt is a desert. So in Egypt, there are very many proverbs. And our proverb today is a very, very simple one. A monkey in his mother's eye is a gazelle.
Absolutely.
How would you interpret that?
Interesting, because first of all, the element of having a mother or in the arms of a mother is somewhere where there is comfort. And given the expanse of the Nile and the desert, it's a very dangerous place. So my first instinct on that proverb would be wherever you can nuzzle next to your mother, there is some safety. And so stay close to something you know, something you can rely, something that can protect you from otherwise a very vast and dangerous terrain, both by water and by land.
Interesting. Absolutely. Stay close to something that will provide you some sort of comfort, I guess.
Yeah, and if you were in a rainstorm, you'd be looking for a tree. Or if you are running from a cheetah, you climb up a tree. Something that can just nuzzle you, give you care.
And we all know who we go to when there's an issue. Our mothers.
Things get thick, absolutely.
Yeah,
without thinking twice.
Yeah, and if you want to see a very vicious wild animal, go for the prey that is young.
Yeah.
And then you will see a mother's wrath
coming out from the woodwork.
Absolutely.
Indeed. All right. So this is the month of September. We're running around 3 years into the administration of President William Ruto since he came into power. And as we get into this conversation and then look into what political tides will be telling, give us your overview of how things have gone over the last 3 years.
Look, the election of President William Ruto has been a disaster.
The election?
Yeah, the election of William Ruto has been a disaster. It was a disaster for many reasons. I think the first reason that one can say that the election of William Ruto was a disaster was because the way in which the president was elected. The president was elected in the backdrop of political controversy surrounding the manner in which the election was conducted, announced, and eventually inaugurated. Why do I say a disaster? I say a disaster because elections are meant to be competitions that have a result, that is acceptable to the majority of the country. When you have an election where from day one it is polarizing, meaning that those who are defeated and those who say they won were not comfortable with each other, that is not the ideal way in which a democracy ought to function. And therefore, from day one, there was a feeling of us against them. And then very soon, after the first disaster of the election of the government, there became an almost immediate street action that was run by the then Azimio La Umoja brigade in terms of street protests in refusing to accept the results coupled with the Supreme Court of Kenya challenge. During that period of political and judicial upheaval, the country continued more and more to become unstable. And in that period of process, the government became strong-handed toward the way it was acting towards the opposition. In that process and standoff, there was born something called the NADCO talks. The NADCO talks were meant to be essentially discussions that would bring the government and the opposition to some kind of workable solution of negotiating these new difficulties. Yeah. Among them was to see whether there were any constitutional loopholes that would allow there to be an existing opposition and an existing government. To that extent, there was a bit of hope for Kenya, because there ought to be a royal opposition and there ought to be a government so that the opposition can keep the government on the day of the day on its toes so that people can get a better government. Unfortunately, what was otherwise NADCO talks turned into cooperation talks that turned into the grand coalition that then betrayed the entire purpose of why they were sitting down to talk. In other words, this was a post-coalition on coalition. So there was just basically the guys getting together and leaving the people out there, leaving a vacuum. Yeah. And that vacuum then created the Gen Z despondency, where the leaders of the day seemed to have worked out their political issues, but they did not deal with the issues affecting the general public, and the public rose up towards those issues, leading to the famous protests of 2024, June 24, and thereafter, which then brought the sad situation where the government seemingly disconnected with the public and the ruling class quite comfortable that they have saved the country. So if you asked me to give you a synopsis of 3 years of Ruto, I can say, 1, we have a police state. Number 2, we have a grand coalition government that is very pleasing to the leadership, but very unpleasing to the public. And finally, we have a budget situation in the country where the country is essentially bankrupt and where we continue to borrow day to day with no end, and the political and economic forecast for the country is doomed.
Can all of this be ascribed to the Ruto administration, all of these things that you talk about? Because, I mean, it's not a conspiracy. The things that you speak of with an economy that's failing, and in terms of, and we put this in quotes, not enough resources to go around to do the basic things that need to be done. But these are perennial issues that have been the bane of Kenya's existence for a while. But can all of these things be ascribed to him, or are we seeing a situation and his administration, or are we seeing a situation under which these things were exacerbated?
One of the greatest criticism of the KANU regime in the past was that it was a one-party state. That is before KANU gave in to the clamor for Section 2A and therefore allowing the route to multi-party democracy. And the argument then by the proponents of the constitutional dispensation that was to change and later become the 2010 constitution was that we needed multi-party democracy in order to stop power being yielded by any one political person or one political party. And the reason that multi-partyism was exciting, it was a democratic process where governments would be held to account, where auditor generals would not speak on their own, where committees of parliament would not just be left alone, but there would be political action to bring the country to awareness where things went wrong. I want to give the example of the Eurobond. During the time when Uhuru Kenyatta's government was borrowing the first Eurobond, there was a very strong opposition. And Raila Odinga then and the ODM were able to bring up the issue of the Eurobond so loudly and so prominently that everybody in the country started asking, what is this Eurobond? And to the extent that it caused the Ministry of the Treasury, Henry Rotich, to be removed, it caused the overhaul of that whole process so that the opposition has that role. The other day, when Tony Gachoka, Kalonzo Musyoka, and Eugene Wamalwa were questioning the Andani deal, we were able to go and reverse a 368 billion deal of the Kenya Airports Authority with JKIA and the Andani Group, simply because of agitation and bringing forward the issues that were of concern to the country. So the multi-party democratic space was created in order that there is accountable government, because the public don't have the tools to be able themselves alone to be able to bring a government into account. Now, what has happened since this grand coalition government came into play? By cannibalizing the opposition, by buying members of the opposition, they have created parliament and parliament alone against the people. So the things that parliament does not want done cannot be done, regardless of whether they are in line with the people or not. A case in point, for example, is this issue of devolution funds. If you want to argue as to whether the counties should have more money so that the counties can do more for the public with regard to health, with regard to education, etc. And yet, on the other hand, your parliament saying we want the CDF because as MPs we have got roles to do at the constituency. You have a situation of a stalemate because there is no opposition, there is no government, so parliament is acting as one in parliament's interest. And so the executive has had this luxury of having parliament at their beck and call. I want to remind you the other week when they were talking even with the county assembly with the impeachment of Johnson Sakaja. I mean, Sakaja has almost 90 signatures signed for him to be impeached. 100 plus for his impeachment. And then one meeting is called at State House. Another meeting is called at Jaramogi Oginga Center. And Sakaja is gone home simply by the order of the executive. And that just shows you that the MPs or the MCAs who sit in these county assemblies and parliament respectively are just rubber stamps of the executive. And to that extent, this is a tragedy for multi-party democracy. It was not what was envisaged in terms of checks and balances, and we therefore do not have vibrant political parties. And one of the reasons I'm here is to argue that you've not had vibrant political parties that stand over the test of time. Parties seem to come at the whim of the people who are at the head of them, rather than ideological platform and the test of time.
Could we argue it's a case of desperate times calling for desperate measures? Because this, when you talk about multi-party, we had the Sufuria movement and the conversation around the cost of living, bringing the prices of food down. Then later, when we saw now this broad-based government and we saw the meetings at KICC, the conversation then was, look, we're in a desperate situation. We need to save our country. And so let's work together, see how we can closely work on the issues that the general public is then raising. So let's forget the question of opposition or government. Let's be one Kenya. Let's be united. And there is a very common phrase that is always used by politicians that always makes me wonder. Like, I turn around and I always wonder who is fighting who, because they will say tuunganishe wa Kenya pamoja. It's a very common thing that they use. Could it be that case that, look, there is a situation that is unique that has presented itself here, and there is need then to unite so that we can then address all these issues together? The president at one point was saying, what do you want me to do? What are the issues?
You know, when I was in school, we were being taught something called the LCD, the lowest common denominator. If you want to find a solution to maths, you look for the lowest common denominator. You know what is shocking to me and has profound me, because I'd been an admirer of Baba for so long. I have not actually come to terms with the fact that the LCD in Kenyan politics for the last 25 years is Raila Odinga. He actually is the lowest common denominator, because this guy is everywhere. I just started looking back from the days of the Pentagon, when all of a sudden there was a politics of 40 against 1. Raila Odinga was able to run this whole country with every single ethnic group forming the Pentagon. I remember in those days there was Henry Kosgei, there was Barala, there was Ngilu, there was Ruto, Mudavadi himself, and all of them against Mwai Kibaki. And it was called, now this is the Pentagon. And in fact, the talk then was 40 against 1. Then from Pentagon, Baba then transitioned and became now the what you call CORD. And then from CORD, he then became NASA. Then from NASA, he became Azimio. And so when I look at all these 25 years transformations of Baba, all of them add up into political power. So he starts with the Pentagon, he goes with the NASA, he goes with CORD, he goes with Azimio, and he's always in government. And what has happened is those people who believe in the constitutional order and the alternative, in all their forms, go through with all these new machinations he comes with. Now he's got one new one called broad-based. He's an expert. So since I have been a young teenager, I've been following Baba's evolution. He never worked. In fact, at one time he was Secretary General of KANU. So Secretary General of KANU, then into Pentagon, then to NASA, then to CORD, then to Azimio. So all these jumps he makes, he takes his people around it, and eventually he ends up in government. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because the whole idea of coalition, broad-based governments are meant to remove the accountability of the elected government to the public on the basis that the public is waiting for something better to come. So whenever they run out of patience, you say, hold on, there will be a referendum. Hold on. No, there will be NATCO. Hold on. We'll start a conclave or a conversation. Hold on. We'll start another commission. Hold on, we are going to find out what this is. So the whole purpose is that of delaying the public execution of an issue so as to buy time, and buying time in politics is actually a way of deceiving people, because in periodic elections, the next elections are on before you have time to resolve what was there before. So I want to allege that in Kenya we have been looking at the elected president, but we have been having an unelected president called Raila Odinga, who has been able to manipulate all the presidents, all of them, including Moi, because he was Secretary General of KANU, where he entered and he became a very powerful minister. He left KANU with half of KANU, what we called the rainbow. Yes. Then he went to give Mwai Kibaki a hell of a time until they had to break out the government of Mwai Kibaki, leading to a referendum of orange and bananas. Then he went to Uhuru, and with Uhuru he went and became a project. They failed with Uhuru, and now he's with Ruto. That's Raila Odinga's enigma. He is a perpetual political player who has used his position as a king of the opposition to manipulate himself into perpetual power. So there has been no period in time since his earlier detention in the early 80s that Raila Odinga has been out of power. Not one time.
There's a lot that people say can be credited to him agitating. You see, all these cycles we're talking about, there are stages or phases to all these cycles. So when it starts as a movement that is for the people, by the people. But the person at the top is Raila Odinga in this case. And the agitation is fighting not just for justice, social justice, but fighting for all these things that affect the general public. Then it morphs slowly to negotiations, to handshakes. The question is, you've worked with him, you know him very well. Why does it change? What happens from the time? Because I remember there was a time, as a journalist, there was a time, if Raila called a press briefing, and you'll get rumors, there's a report, there's going to be an earthquake.
You need to be the one.
From the Eurobonds and so on and so forth. You know things are going to be bad. And he would reveal things that are happening. You remember the Magarian brothers and all those things? It was Baba who was bringing these things up. But then slowly by slowly, things start changing. What happens?
And that is a study that will be done over time. When people look at the history of Raila Odinga and his role in Kenya, I think that history is going to start to be rewritten. And I think the first time that this became very apparent to the majority of the public was the Gen Z struggle. The Gen Z, the young people who do not know the things you are saying about what Baba has done before, came with their own time, in their own generation, in their own moment, and began to agitate for a better Kenya. And the first courtesy they gave was to Raila Odinga. And they said, Baba, stay aside. You've done your part. Now we want to do this thing our way because we have got issues we need to deal about our time, our generation. And the sad thing about this whole thing is that as much as the Gen Z blame William Ruto, they blame Baba. Because Baba came and involved himself, emancipated himself in something they had asked him not to remain. And that is the answer to your question. That was this ever for Kenya or was it always for Baba? The other day when he was talking about the compensation of victims, the first person who was appointed into this so-called controversial victim compensation scheme was Professor Makau Mutua, a very well-known sidekick of Raila Odinga. And the question then begins, first of all, do you have justice? Are policemen arrested, charged? Are the killers of these children taken to book? Is there any form of justice even before you talk about restitution and you talk about money? So there seems to be this upside down way of looking at, look, a life is worth X amount. I mean, the whole thinking around what Raila Odinga has stood for is now beginning to be questioned. In fact, not just by Tony Gachoka, by his own party. When you have the Secretary General of the Orange Democratic Party, Edwin Sifuna, openly saying that I differ with the decisions of the party and I'm prepared to be thrown out or to go out, when you have Tim Wanyonyi, a leading gubernatorial candidate for Nairobi, saying I can no longer have confidence in the Orange Democratic Party and goes to Bungoma. When you've got even people come from Luo Nyanza, like Babu Owino, saying all of a sudden I have no space in Raila's ODM, I need to chart my own way. You are creating a situation where you're beginning to see an implosion of the Orange Democratic Party. And I'm saying this because it's not because that Raila has changed. It is because of the things that Raila is supporting consistently.
Okay, but is that I mean, I hate to whittle it down to right and wrong, but doesn't that just show that he's an astute politician who knows what he's doing? Here we are thinking that the rest of the world, and in this place, the world being Kenya, should have said, well, he fought for human rights. He fought for a particular political dispensation. But it shows that he was good at what he did. What did he owe the people of Kenya?
One of Raila Odinga's biggest political defeats came in a by-election in Musambweni, where he had advantages, and before the last election he was so sure to win it, and he had sent out his pointman Joho and everybody to go and bring home the seat there in Ukunda. And when that by-election came, it went completely against what Baba had said. Now, we are going to be having by-elections on the 27th of December. A key among those by-elections is a seat in Malava. Malava has traditionally been an opposition zone when Musalia Mudavadi and the rest were in the opposition. And now, all of a sudden, because of the coalition agreements between Ruto and Mudavadi, Malava is seen to be a must win for the UDA. And of course, now with Baba there, they believe that they are going to win the Malava by-election. Now, for example, if the opposition go and win the Malava by-election, despite the combined strength of Mudavadi, Wetangula, Ruto, and Raila, that will be a major, major call about what is happening in Western Kenya. Should there also be a defeat of government in Embu, in Bere, where the combined UDA, 7 candidates have given in for the one of the opposition of the Democratic Party, then that will send several signals. I see 2 things happening in the next by-elections. Number one, if the opposition win Mbere and Embu and they win Malava, then there will be a big focus on Mudavadi and a big focus on Kindiki, who will be the right hand of Ruto, because none of them will be able to show they can carry a constituency. And in the middle of all that is Baba. So what role Baba will play in helping Mudavadi win the Malava seat is yet to be seen, but it's on the 27th of November.
As interesting as all of this actually is, we then ask questions that this political monopoly that's being played, that's being carried out by all the players, then it leaves the questions that Kenyans are asking hanging in the balance. That it's not necessarily that people want to come in and make good for the people of Kenya, but people want to come in and stamp the authority. I mean, just look at the narrative that you've given about Raila Odinga over the last 20 or 25 years in terms of what he has been able to do or achieve. The fruits that fall along the wayside is what Kenyans pick up. What happens to the rule of law and governance? What happens to constitutionalism? What happens to conducive environments for business and or work? What happens to health and safety? What happens to education and infrastructure? When all of these things, or are these campaign promises that end up being a means to an end?
You can only call it a failure of multi-party democracy because, multi-party democracy was meant to ensure that you don't have those failures. Multi-party democracy was to give enough choice to the public to elect people of quality and substance, so that when you have these kind of situations, the public had... let me give an example. When Wangari Maathai was elected as an MP, she stood on her own feet on the issue of the economy, but also in terms of ecology or the green movement. She was able to not only rise to become a Nobel Peace Prize winner, but to make Kenya very, very conscious about green forests, Karura, and all the things that come around with it. We've had individual people in this country like J.M. Kariuki who have stood for economic empowerment of the common man and were able to do it on their own feet. There are people who have come here, people like ministers like Michuki, who came and put, very, very high standards in ethics and work and left their ministries, standing better than they found them. So multi-party democracies from time to time create opportunity for individuals to rise and to be able to go against the status quo. What we need right now in Kenya, and one of the reasons I'm running for the Nairobi Gubernatorial seat, is because there must be a break into this monotony. There must be a time where people stand up and say, hold on, I'm standing on my own feet. Because the way things are going, the country cannot go on this way at all. And I think that if men and women across the country, given where we have reached with the 2010 Constitution, have the courage and, the weather to actually stand up and be counted, there can be a break to this. And I wanted to give you an example of how this has happened. If you remember Kivutha Kibwana in the last election, many people would say that Makueni was a good standard, that there was a county that was well run by a governor who was well within his means. You actually find Kivutha Kibwana having tea and soda in the normal cafe in town, because he never went there for enrichment. He never went there to grow his own personal self, but he went there to uplift Makueni. If you could have 10 Kivutha Kibwanas and others like that, it is possible to uplift this country. So where we are discussing these by-elections and why it's an important time to discuss them, it can be the litmus test. You can actually use by-elections like this that don't come often, and they come within the calendar of the political year, to send a warning shot to the political class that, look, there are going to be people who are going to be elected by the public who are going to uphold the standards of leadership and integrity. And for KANU, we are running a candidate in Kariobangi North, and we are going to ensure that we say, look, it doesn't have to be this party or that party that takes ownership of Nairobi. We would want to see that political parties with the right candidate can actually run a candidate somewhere and win, and away from the clutter of, this grand government or the clutter of the grand opposition, that you can actually run a man or woman on the basis of his record and be able to win an election.
You spoke about breaking monotony, and you gave reference to quite a number of people who, like Kivutha Kibwana, you said how he managed and ran Makueni County as the governor, as an example. But what exactly is monopoly in Nairobi politics today for you? What is it?
It's sadly the fact that, the corruption indicators that drive Nairobi seem to consume every governor since Kidero. That if you were to take all governors elected in Nairobi, their LCD is corruption. Because it just seems that everybody who has sat on that seat, the whole argument about governance comes back to the issue of money. How much is being looted? How much is not being done? How much is looted? How much is not being done? Let me give an example of what I mean. From the Kidero time, it led to cases going to the IEBs. What do you call it? Anti-corruption.
Yes.
Anti-corruption, yeah. And all of it was based on, poor procurement, wastage, what you call pending bills, all the things that, attract the wrong money. Then from there, you had the Sonko. From Sonko, not only could he not finish his term, he was actually removed and replaced by a general, by his own government, by his own nominating party, on basis of misuse of public funds and the abuse of funds. As we speak now, the MCAs of Nairobi County are accusing their own governor of massive corruption. In fact, they are saying that Kidero and Sonko combined, so Sakaja has done more. So there is this appetite in Nairobi to loot this city and not to give any services. And the reason around it mostly is based around pending bills, based upon awarding of planning and urban planning contracts and things that require or forensic tests in order to tell the authenticity have never been done. So we have a situation where Nairobi is by far the most corrupt, the most mismanaged county in the country, and the person who is there is just incapable, right from his academic papers to his type of governance. Justice Sakaja has really been overwhelmed by the county of Nairobi.
Before we come into the intrigues of Nairobi, because yesterday, of course, then looking into conversations around what Nairobi needs, let's go back to the political parties. We know for a fact that most of the time, political parties are the vehicles through which individuals then will get to a position of leadership that they seek. Not often in Kenya do we see the ideological side of political parties being practiced, that you will not then be able to say that, well, the party is speaking for this position, whether it is on nationalism, patriotism, foreign policy, or whether it is on economics or development. We don't, in Kenya, the political parties don't carry that kind of agenda. Usually it is a vehicle to achieve a position or to maintain and or exceed political expediency. Okay, so that could be a model that Kenya decides that it's going to go with. That's all right. So KANU is one of the oldest parties in the country. And we know that it was the party. We also then, much later on in this political arena, saw that KANU now buddied up with others and formed part of Azimio. Is KANU out of that? I mean, as Azimio as a political giant, this monolith of people no longer exists for all intents and purposes. So where does that leave the party in terms of what it's then being able to do? You've already told us that you'll field a candidate in the by-election. Is it a party still being looked at for, participation?
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, KANU never signed a memorandum of understanding with parties to form a coalition government in the last general election. What KANU did was sympathize with the opposition, but ran its candidates countrywide.
Okay.
I also want to agree with you that from the beginning, when independence was formed, KANU came from something called KAU, the Kenya African Union for younger voters. And the Kenya African Union was then being led by Harry Thuku and them. And then Jomo Kenyatta took over with Tom Mboya, and they began to build the Kenya African National Union. At that same time, there was another body, the Kenya African Democratic Union, being led by Ronald Ngala and President Daniel Moi, which was called KADU, and they were running separately. Sometime in the little general election of 67, KADU and KANU merged.
Yes.
And Odinga's Kenya People's Union split from KANU, so that Jaramogi, who was the vice president of Kenyatta, began his own party, the Kenya People's Union. And it was seen then to be a socialist party whose ideas were left of center. And Kenyatta's KANU and Tom Mboya were seen to be more like capitalist kind of party that was right of center. And at that time, there was this divide of the East and the West. So Jaramogi was seen to gravitas towards Russia and the East, and Jomo Kenyatta towards the democracies of the West. And that is how the politics of 67 began. As those politics went on, then KANU was continuing to become a dominant force, and Jaramogi Odinga became an opposition figurehead, to the extent where Kenyans now can remember, to the multi-party clamor. At the time for multi-party clamor, there was Jaramogi Oginga as a dawn of the opposition, and against the prevailing KANU of then-President Moi. And so that gives an idea where that divide began. And then it was during that election of post the multi-party democracy that then this coming together of politicians began. But coming to KANU always remained distinct and decided to become a party on its own and stand on its own feet. In the last election, KANU lost the Baringo Gubernatorial seat, which belongs to Senator Gideon Moi, and then it went into a bit of a lull, but still retains members of parliament both as MCAs and parliamentarians. So at the moment, KANU is focusing itself to come strongly in the next elections. KANU is preparing for elections at all levels of the country, from MCAs to MPs, governors, and a presidential bid. Now, the problems that KANU has faced are no different from the other people facing the country, which is to bring young people and to energize the party in a way in which it can be modernized in order to take advantage of the realities to today.
So it's not currently modernized?
I think...
Still living in the past as a party?
I would say we are in the process by opening ourselves to saying that we have no predetermined leaders.
Okay.
We are not coming in and saying these are the leaders that you must follow, and nyinyi hamuna nafasi. In fact, as far as KANU is concerned, KANU has an open slate,
so Kenya
and is ready to...
Okay. So, Tony, KANU is like a lot of what we heard in the movement, where they say leaderless, tribeless, kind of like an open system where, we'll get there when we need to. Is that what you're saying?
You know, political parties are not run by men. They are not run by women. Political parties are ideologically strong.
Or they should be.
What happens is men and women are temporary holders of office in political parties. What holds political parties is the strength of their ideas. You know, when you open a church on Sunday, I don't normally see a sign, please walk into this church. When you open the door, and the faithful come into the church, and that becomes the strength of the church. It becomes how the church draws the people that come into it. Political parties define themselves, their ideology and their manifestos, and people then come into those churches, come into those parties for that reason. What KANU is now doing, and what I'm doing this morning, is part of talking up the fact that the Party of Independence has been there since 1964. When it merged with KADU, that party has been reliable. It is not political. It's a national party. It is in every part of the country, and everybody can feel at home with the party, just the way in which KANU feels at home in every part of the country. And so other countries have a warm tradition of having parties that have survived generations and generations. And we are proud to be part of that ongoing generation that was begun by Jomo Kenyatta, carried on by Daniel Moi. Mwai Kibaki was there. Kalonzo Musyoka is still a live member of KANU. And so even Raila Odinga himself has been Secretary General of KANU. President Ruto has been a member of KANU. KANU is a party where none of them in the political arena can ever say they were never part of it.
And yet, there is a need for it to be more robust in its activities in order for it as a party which would then carry individuals who want to take up a particular political position. It would then need the party to come alive. So it is not just the old faithful, establishment in a shanty town somewhere that is not going anywhere. People know that they can go in there for a drink every now and then. It's never going to close, but it's always been there. But then there's a shiny new guy on the side of the street that everybody's flocking to. Does KANU need to paint its wall?
Are you suggesting there is a more maverick person to bring into KANU than Tony Gachoka?
I'm asking a
well,
question.
I'm just asking you. Listen, let me ask you.
So the question is, Tony,
Yes.
are you going to, paint the walls and, chuck some stuff from under the stairs and make it a little bit brighter for people to realize what's going on with the party?
Absolutely. I can tell you in the next few weeks, you're going to see a lot more because we are going to be speaking very bluntly. We are going to be talking, power to the people, and we are going to be speaking truth to power. And the reason is because KANU, by its nature and by its history, has got not only the locus standi, but the duty to ensure that we safeguard particularly the Constitution. The 2010 Constitution is a product of having allowed Section 2A to open up multi-party democracy. And to see the collapse of multi-party democracy is to see the collapse of the 2010 Constitution. We must make KANU the party that stands by the 2010 Constitution. We must make KANU the party that stands by the rule of law. We must stand KANU to be the party that fights for the aggrieved and for the person who is trodden upon. We must make sure that the young people of this country don't have to jump from party to party every cycle, and that there can be reliability and there can be stability in there being a credible organization that has stood the test of time and one that can be inherited by their children and their grandchildren. Okay. So here in building this thing, it is something that I would want to leave behind and look back and say, look, under since independence in the 60s, KANU has now got its strength back in the 1920s. And by the 1930s, KANU is back and KANU is roaring and KANU is taking its place. That to me would be a beautiful testament of the current leadership that both I and Gideon Moi can try and bring to the table to ensure that this party can be seen, and not only seen, but can be hard to be seen.
Well, let's talk about the by-elections. I saw a picture of you with the candidate that you're fielding for this by-election, and my question, I have several, but my first question is KANU going to be fielding candidates for all this?
Yeah, but let me tell you about Kariobangi. There's an interesting seat. That seat was left by a guy called Manuve. He was an MCA. He was bringing an impeachment motion against Sakaja, and then he died mysteriously. There's a lot of rumors as to how he died, but he was the one bringing the impeachment motion. He comes from Kariobangi North. Now, Peter Karaoke was a guy who was second. That's a guy who was now running against him, but then he could not get on the ballot because of UDA played him around. So he moved from UDA and joined KANU. And so his name is Peter Karaoke Nganga, and he came to see me. We had several meetings, and we agreed that we are going to not only run him in Kariobangi North, I'm going to go myself personally and camp in Kariobangi North, and we are going to vote as a litmus test to see whether or not Nairobi is ready to elect a KANU MCA and whether Nairobi is ready to elect a KANU governor or not. Okay. So he, as much as Peter Karaoke Nganga is standing, Tony Gachoka is also on the ballot. So lazima niingie huko kwa hali na mali na nifanye campaign ili tuone kama chama ya mama na baba tunaweza tingiza.
As you tingiza, that MCA level, MP level, is there a possibility you're also going to field the presidential candidate? Now that we are seeing alliances and party forming themselves around other coalitions.
I can tell you without fear of contradiction, KANU is running a presidential candidate.
You're not going to be in a coalition?
Oh, no. By next year, there will be a major event. My friend, listen, what Tony Gachoka is doing ni kukata njia. Unajua, when you're coming now toward a major ocean, you must have a tributary that unafungua, otherwise maji itapotea kwa njia. We are rebuilding KANU, rebranding KANU, and I can tell you KANU will be the last nail on William Ruto's coffin. People are assuming the Rift Valley will be a place just for Ruto to walk around as he wishes. There will be a substantial presidential bid that is going to turn the politics of the country on its head. Right now, people are rearranging themselves that who is going to run. I'm sure people are talking about my good friend Rigathi G, Rigathi Gachagua. People are talking about Kalonzo Musyoka. People are talking about my good friend Eugene Wamalwa. People are talking about Matiang'i. But people better know and prepare that without any doubt, Gideon Moi is a candidate for president come 2027. Now, I am telling you, KANU will be ready, and KANU will give William Ruto a run for his money.
That's official.
That is official. I'm speaking officially on KANU's permission. And where else better than to say it here at SpiceFM? Nobody can say I'm being rigged here.
Well, okay. Well, let's look into Nairobi for a minute then, shall we, Tony? Because it's a big deal. And like I said, we had a conversation around Nairobi yesterday and a lot of the broken systems. And usually you need to use the capital administration as a pivot point as to what would then happen and reverberate through the rest of the country. Does Nairobi need a governor?
That is one of the best questions I've had. Actually, let me tell you, I don't know whether we need a policeman, a prosecutor, and a judge. You know, the ones with a hangman. Because you see what has happened. Nairobi is a crime scene.
Okay.
Every part of Nairobi requires DNA evidence, it requires forensic. There is a disaster in Nairobi. Let us start from governance. From the point of where the direction of Nairobi is being run, meaning the cabinet. The quality of the cabinet is absolutely substandard. So there is nothing that is being developed at a cabinet level that can become a policy that can help Nairobi. And that I mean from the transport system, whether it be tramming, whether it be underground, whether it be public transport systems, all those things, including education, including hospital, all the things which are cabinet level are a disaster. Coming to issues of management. The issues of management and financial propriety in Nairobi is a complete disaster. There is no revenue coming to match the expenditure. The expenditure is growing, and that expenditure, a lot of it is ghost workers. A lot of the expenditure is pending bills which have never been verified by forensic audits or otherwise, and are not therefore payable in the right way. Coming back to the issue of beautification or the security of Nairobi, which are both the same. Because if you have no lights and you have no street lights, then there is insecurity. If there is insecurity, there is theft at night, there is crime. All of these things are interrelated and interdependent into a lack of a managerial capacity that comes to the center of Nairobi by electing a governor who has taken on more than he could. He couldn't take on school. He can definitely not take on the county government of Nairobi. This man is just beyond his ability to do. He cannot do it. In fact, I remember when he had a conflict with the Kenya Power and Lighting Authority, his solution was to take garbage, and put it in front of Kenya Power. And that is not how you resolve conflicts. Conflict resolution requires sobriety, requires interventions and matters that can bring, sustainable changes in a way in which both the Kenya Power and the public benefit. So we must call Nairobi what it is, a complete, total disaster. We must also say that this is the most unpopular governor since the election of governors began. He's worse than Sonko, he's worse than Kidero, and it's not just me saying it, it's even his MCAs. And in fact, other than the courtesy of Ruto and Raila who are carrying him, because I understand he's very generous with his bags. Other than that, there's nothing holding this governor in office. So yes, Nairobi is something that I'm very serious about. I want to assure you that it's going to be a two-horse race between Tony Gachoka and Justin Sakaja, and I am going to ensure that we remove him from office. Okay,
Tony, it's one thing to remove Sakaja, and as people say, it's all talk until you get to the position. Sakaja, these same things you're raising, Sakaja in very many interviews spoke over the same things with regards to the previous administration. And in his manifesto, key campaign manifesto, he had some 4 pillars. One of them was order. The next one was dignity and hope and opportunity. And the title, Let's Make Nairobi Work. And he spoke so well. He had a very, very impressive document on how he was going to establish all these things, decentralizing governance in 5 administrative boroughs within the city. He spoke about security. He spoke about restoring order in public transport, reforming healthcare. All these things that he spoke of, none.
So I want to ask you then this question.
Yes.
Do you know who stopped the Andani deal in Kenya and why? The airport deal between the Andani Group and Jomo Kenyatta International Airport was stopped by Tony Gachoka.
Okay.
And the reason is simple. Tony Gachoka saw the problem, went to court, under a certificate of urgency petition. I put in a strong legal team led by Kalonzo Musyoka, Eugene Wamalwa, Ndegwa Njiru, Kibe Muigai, etc. But it was the petition of Tony Gachoka that put the end to Andani Airport. And why? What was the reason? The biggest investment in Nairobi County is the airport. Because in the airport, we bring in not only the traffic and the people who do business in this town, but also we do every night over 340 tons of horticulture. We export flowers, we export courgettes and avocados and all manner of things throughout, and roses all over Europe, which creates a huge market on what we call the perishable items. Those items are a major source of revenue for the airport, for our people, and for the other services which are unseen when you deal with an airport. The airport is a part that brings security to the capital city and security to the country. It is not something that you subcontract to a foreign entity. The airport also becomes the hub that connects Nairobi to all other parts of Africa. How you can have a sitting governor laughing with an executive about carving out your airport and saying nothing about it. Those are some of the things which separate Tony Gachoka and Sakaja. It is a matter of public record. It is a matter of public record that the High Court stopped the Adani deal on the Tony Gachoka.
But Tony, are you saying you're the first one who raised the Adani
I
issue?
did not raise it as the first one. There were many whistleblowers, and people do that, and that's why there is a country. But I am saying I am the one that took the matter to court, and it is a matter of public record.
And because of that, that would now show.
And even now, I enjoy the conservatory orders, which stopped the government from doing that until they were to comply with it.
And so that, even as we wrap this up really quickly, would lead to then folks understanding that if you were able to stop such a monumental thing from happening in Nairobi, it leads to looking into how a leadership of Tony Gachoka would be over Nairobi?
Of course, because my other one, if you remember in the 90s, I'm the one who stopped the Golden Bag scandal. I was the chief executive of Finance magazine. I wrote about Golden Bag and Kamlesh Matni and looting this whole country. And I was sent to committee prison for what the work I did. I was only released because of Amnesty International. Because my record on standing in public governance issue is a matter of public record. I have always said no to the theft of public resources. I have been known as a veteran journalist, as one who has not just said it, but done it, and had done it very loudly. I don't think there's another Kenyan who has been jailed by 7 judges of the Court of Appeal. And I was judged by simply calling the Court of Appeal the center of corruption as it was in the time, because they allowed Kamlesh Patni to loot over 68 billion shillings in Kenya unperturbed and untouched. We wrote about the Aglo-leasing scandal. We did so much in the 90s to be able to bring accountability and fairness to the country. And this country needs people with character, people who can stand up and say no, that this enough is enough, and we need a country that is going to be governed by laws and not by men.
Tony Gachoka, he's the Nairobi gubernatorial aspirant in the coming elections in 2027, has been our guest this hour, looking into intrigues around KANU, and not just the old establishment on the side of the road, but one to be reckoned with, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Tony Gachoka, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Asante sana, may you have a blessed day. They say that ambition without knowledge is like a ship on land.
Oh, there you go, at 8:01.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.